So today's presentation is the drop trap, trapper's best friend, and it is a trapper's best friend. And so I just wanted to give you a bit of a summary. This presentation is being recorded, and it will be posted on our YouTube channel probably within a couple of weeks. If you want to check in on that, feel free to email me. I can update you on the status of that, or if you are really desperate, we can give you a rough cut if you need to see it within 24 hours. So just email me at Stacy@Community Cats Podcast if you have any questions that you want to have answered. Let me think. We have a couple of polls coming up. So if you're new to the polls, make sure that you are not in full screen. Please, Kristen, chime in if I'm getting this wrong. But if you're in the full screen mode, sometimes those polls don't work so well. So just make sure you shrink yourself down, and then you should be able to participate in the polls. Kristen, I don't know if you want to turn your microphone on and explain that better than I did, but I want to make sure everybody can participate in those polls.
I actually think you did a great job explaining it. So again, if as Stacy mentioned, you have options to change the screens from full screen to floating windows. So just make sure your full screen is not on, because otherwise you won't be able to do the polls. And that's really you. Stacy did a better job explaining it than me. So I think that's something we've dealt with this a few times.
Excellent, excellent, great. I just wanted to make sure I had it right. So today's webinar is sponsored by Tomahawk Live Traps. Tomahawk has sponsored the webinar series for the whole year, and we're extremely grateful and thankful for that opportunity. And they also are offering a 10% discount off of all their Tomahawk products if you order your products and you use the coupon code DCNC20, and we'll put that in the chat. That's DCNC20. You'll get 10% off any orders with Tomahawk Traps. Their mission is to aspire to exceed customers' expectations by providing them with the highest quality humane animal control products available. And their website is www.livetrap.com. All right, so for today's presentation, we have the folks here at Neighborhood Cats sharing information about the drop trap. Brian Cordes and Susie Richmond are both here with us today. Brian Cordes is the founder and National Programs Director for Neighborhood Cats, a leading community cat advocacy group with hands-on programs in New York City, New Jersey, and Maui. And currently, he and his wife, Susan Richmond, live in Hawaii and are usually found trapping cats or releasing them after they've been neutered. Unfortunately, things may be a little bit different at this point in time. Many of you know Brian from his time at PetSmart Charities, where he oversaw over $21 million in TNR and spay-neuter projects. Thank you very, very, very much, Brian, for your support with regards to that, game-changing across the country. And he has also produced quite a few educational materials on trap, neuter, return, award-winning books and videos, and has assisted numerous communities in setting up large-scale TNR programs, and is a frequent presenter on community cat issues. Brian has a Bachelor of Arts degree from Cornell University and a JD from the University of California at Berkeley. Susie Richmond, who is not always in the background, because she did an awesome presentation about fundraising, using email for fundraising, and that is in our YouTube list. So how to do a fundraising initiative, especially during this time of coronavirus. And if folks want a link to that, we'll make sure we get that out there also. She did a fantastic job with that, but Susie's going to be in the background helping with Q&A today along with me. She joined the organization after over 20 years running a major New York City shelter and nonprofit veterinary clinic at New York Neighborhood Cats. She has led multiple targeted TNR projects in New York City and northern New Jersey, managed a program for providing scholarships to veterinarians for training in high volume spay-neuter of community cats, and co-authored the Humane Society of the United States online course on TNR. And in her spare time, when the spay-neuter clinics are open and at full capacity, she is out there trapping cats. But at this point in time, I'm introducing Brian, and he will be with you for the next couple of hours talking about the drop trap, a trapper's best friend. I hope you enjoy, everybody.
And, thank you everybody for taking time. But I think if you're a beginner, you'll learn how to use this. If you're more advanced, there'll be a little bit in the beginning about basic stuff, but we'll be getting into kind of creative and advanced use of the drop trap as well. Okay, I'm gonna sign off on the webcam and get into the presentation. Before we begin, just want to let you know we have the last webinar that we did with Community Cats podcast in this series is trapping tips and tricks. So that's more about just trapping in general, but all sorts of interesting ideas and creative stuff. So that's been recorded, and you can access that at communitycatspodcast.com. Just go to the home page, click on resources, and then on the public webinar archive. And as you scroll down the page, you can find it. So I won't spend a lot of time, but this is myself and Susie. You can see our Hawaiian setting and our Hawaiian face masks there. And actually, I want to wear a face mask because first thing I want to mention is a new guide that we put together with Alley Cat Advocates and the Humane Society of the United States. It's about social trapping and practicing social distancing. So I'm sure a lot of you are already doing many of these things, but we thought it would be a good idea to put it all in one place. So this guide, it's about 3 pages, not real long. You can go to neighborhoodcats.org/COVID-19, or if you just go to the home page and you'll see a button on the top for COVID-19, and then you can download the I'm sorry, my cats have decided to start a fight at this very moment. You can download the handout from there. Okay, so what is a drop trap? Start at the very beginning, and it's really, this is kind of a silly little depiction, but the basic idea, it's not a complicated idea. It's the old prop a box up on a stick and wrap a string around it, get the cat to go under, and then you pull the string. Now, obviously, it's a little more complicated because you need to get the cat out of the box, but that's the basic concept. And before we go further, I want to get a sense of how much experience we have here today with the drop trap. So, Stacy, do you want to run that first poll? Okay, so do you have none? Have you caught 1 to 10 cats? Have you caught 11 to 50? More than 50? So how many cats have you caught with the drop trap?
All right, people are voting. 49% say none yet, 24% 1 to 10, 17% 11 to 50, 11% more than 50.
Okay, well, that's great. So we have like a 50-50 split between people who have experience and people who have none. So perfect audience here. Okay, so we're gonna, the primary tool we're gonna talk about is Neighborhood Cats Drop Trap, which is manufactured by Tomahawk Live Trap. And that's what it's pictured here, in its fully assembled and then its fully unassembled form. So you can see it folds flat into like a suitcase style. So it makes it very easy to carry around. This is the model DT1, Drop Trap 1. It's 36 inches square by 14 inches high. And I do mention the DT1. There is another model that Tomahawk manufactures called the DT2, and it's 48 by 48, so a foot wider in each direction. We prefer the 36. If you use it properly, that's more than enough size, and it's lighter and a little bit safer. But both are available. You can also make your own drop trap if you're so inclined. And if you're looking for ideas, there's a website called the Drop Trap Design Bank. And also for everybody, these slides that you're seeing today are available as a handout. So you can you don't have to worry about copying down all the links. Just go ahead before the webinar is over and download all the slides. I think it says Drop Trap Webinar. Also, that last handout I talked about, the guide I talked about with trapping during COVID-19, you can download that as well. So make sure to take advantage of and grab all the handouts before you leave today. So you'll find a number of different ideas for homemade drop traps at the design bank, including out of wood, out of PVC piping, foldable, all kinds of things. If you're looking for a real basic non-foldable one, so a 3-foot square that's you're going to have to stick in the back of your minivan or something because it's pretty big, that you can make out of wooden netting, then you can go to Neighborhood Cat's website. We have a drop trap page, and there are basic plans for building something real simple like that. If you're a little bit inclined with your hands and no carpentry, it's not that hard to build a foldable one. Like you see in the picture here, it may not look all that elegant, but it works quite well. We greatly prefer the Tomahawk trap. Sells for about $110, so it's probably maybe a little more expensive than a do-it-yourself, but they're much easier to clean. You know, it's almost impossible to clean one of these wooden ones thoroughly, and they're usually more stable in the wind is something that we discovered. So what's the psychology behind a drop trap? Why are they so effective? And it's because cats are naturally wary of entering unfamiliar and confined spaces where there's no clear path out. It just raises all their natural fear instincts. And that's why when you're using a normal box trap, like you see in the photo here, that's why you need to deprive them of food for at least 24 hours before you're trapping, so that they're extra hungry. And that extra hunger is what drives them into entering the trap and going all the way to the bait. So even then, as you can see in the photo, sometimes they don't cooperate. And we all know those cats who just won't go into a regular box trap. With a drop trap, they're not going into the trap, they're going under it. And we can thank the cat goddess for this, but they are much less cautious about going under than they are about going into. Now there'll be a little bit of fear because it's an unfamiliar object. So sometimes they walk around it a little bit, they'll smell it. It may really tough cats, it may take more than one try, but for the most part, once they get used to the idea that that object is there, going under it is no big deal. And you'll see a lot of cats that just march right under it without any hesitation. So as a result, you don't have to get the cats really hungry, although it doesn't hurt. We still recommend withholding food for 24 hours before. But if you're in a situation where you can't withhold the food, let's say you're dealing with a caretaker who just won't stop feeding, or you can't identify that caretaker, then if you can show up before they've eaten that day and provide them with their normal food, there's a very good chance that they'll just go under, and they don't need to be starved out to the degree you do with a normal trap. So this is why they're so effective. So what are some of the uses for the drop trap? And we'll be going over a few of these in a lot more detail. So selective trapping. So if you just want to get one particular cat, let's say it's the last cat in the colony, or it might be a pregnant cat or an injured cat, whatever it might be, you can put a big bowl of bait under the drop trap and just hang out and wait till the cat that you're after goes under, and then trigger the trap. So it's very good for picking one out of the crowd. Like I mentioned, let's say you're doing a mass trapping, you're out there with your 25 traps trying to catch your 20 cats, and you've caught 18 of them, and it's getting late, and there's the two are still hanging around, but they just won't go into a box trap. Well, that's a good time to break out a drop trap and see if they'll go under that. And often they will, again, because they're not as afraid of it. You can target catching mom and kittens, the whole bunch at once. And another thing we'll show you in detail is, if you're doing, another idea with a mass trapping is instead of waiting to the end to maybe pick off one or two more before you leave, You can try to catch a whole bunch of them at the very beginning of the mass trapping by using more than one drop trap. So we had a situation with that will show you where there were about 20 cats in a colony, 15 to 20, and at the very beginning of the trapping, we caught like 9 of them in one go, and then put out the box traps for the rest. And some trappers like the drop trap so much that they just don't use box traps at all. They just use box traps to transfer the cats into after they've caught them with the drop trap. So just a quick warning, after you've seen this webinar today and you've gotten a hold of a drop trap, don't try it for the first time on that cat you've been after for the last 5 years. Make sure you practice it, even if you just do it once. Practice dropping the trap and then transferring a cat into a box trap or a transfer cage. If you've never done it before, it'll feel like there's a dozen ways that things can go wrong, and they can the first time. After you've done it once, maybe twice, you're an expert, and you won't make that mistake. But don't give yourself at least 1 or 2 practice tries before you go live with that cat who finally goes in. So preparations, get the cats the same as really with any trapping. Get the cats on a feeding pattern, so they're eating as consistently as possible at the same time in the same place. So if you can be very precise about it, and the cats are fed at 5 p.m. every evening on the dot, that's great, because they'll start showing up at 4:30 and they'll all be there at 5, and you know that's when you're going to trap. If you can't be that precise, then narrow the window as much as you can. Put out food in the morning, take it away when you get home from work, or if you can stop by after lunch, or put it out when you get home at 5 and take it away at 7 or 8. Try to narrow the window. The worst thing you can do for any kind of trapping is just have food out all the time, and then when you're trapping, you really have no idea when the cats are going to show up, and that makes it very difficult. With the drop trap, make sure you're feeding at a spot where a drop trap will work. So we'll go over this in more detail, but basically it needs to be on a surface that's flat. There has to be enough room to the side to transfer into a box trap, and you need to be able to see the trap from a distance. So think about that when you're feeding them. And then withhold food on the day of the trapping or the night before. But like I said, actually, if you can withhold for 24 hours, they're just going to go in faster and easier. Here's a quick equipment list. This is more so you can print this out and have it as a checklist. But you're going to need a string. You need a heavy object. There's an anchor flap that folds down to the side of the drop trap, and you put a heavy weight on it so that after you've caught the cats, they can't drag the trap down the block, and you're running after chasing them. Or what can happen is they can pull the trap onto an uneven surface and then create a gap that they can get out from under. So you want the trap to stay in place. You want to be able to cover the trap quickly. So a blanket or a large sheet. A blanket is better just because it's a little heavier and it will just cover faster. A large plastic non-breakable bowl. It's important that it's not breakable. They can scamper around in there after they're trapped, and you don't want them running into something that can break and get hurt. Bring lots of bait. You need box traps with rear doors that slide up guillotine style for the transfers. Sheets for covering the box traps after you've transferred them in. Trap dividers, and you'll see a couple of uses today for trap dividers, why you want to have them. Good idea to have a pair of binoculars if you're watching from a distance, especially if some of the cats are ear tipped and some are not, so you can tell. And if you can do it with a helper and not do it alone, a lot of the stuff is going to be much easier, although you can certainly use a drop trap alone. Here's a new piece of equipment that's just come out recently that we're really excited about. and it's a door opening reducer is the fancy name for it, and that's what you see in the middle. And basically, the problem was that so the Tomahawk also manufactures a whole line of cats that we've helped design, the Neighborhood Cats series, and those have openings that are 10 inches wide and 12 inches high, and they perfectly match the transfer door that you can see on the right there out of the drop trap. And you just push one up against it, and there's a perfect match. There's no gaps. But a lot of people we know use True Catch, and the 30 LTD on the left there is probably the most popular True Catch trap for feral cats or community cats in general. Its opening out the rear door is 9 inches by 11 inches, so it's about an inch less than the opening of the Tomahawk and an inch of less height too. So that creates a little bit of a gap when you're doing the transfer, and every once in a while we'll get like a teenage kitten. We learned to avoid this, but in the beginning, we had one or two that squeezed their way out of that 1 inch opening, believe it or not. They get a paw in, and then they are able to push a little bit further to the side, and they move so quickly that boom, they're gone before you even know what happened. So this adapter takes care of that problem, and it slides in behind the transfer door and creates an opening that is perfect for the 30 LTD or any other trap that has those dimensions. And this is how you install it. Again, you insert it from above. Before you put the top of the drop trap on, you're going to unfold the main frame and then slide this insert behind the grooves, not in the grooves or in front, but behind from above. And then you can see on the right there, you take a zip tie, and again, make sure the zip tie is behind the groove so it doesn't interfere with the transfer door, and zip tie the insert onto the main frame. And that's so that if you're moving the drop trap around, you lift it up, this insert doesn't just fall out the bottom. It's a $10 item. What we do is we have it in the drop trap, we have it zip tied, and we just use it all the time. We don't take it in or out depending on whether we're using True Catch or Tomahawk. We just leave it in because it works just fine with the Tomahawk's just a slightly smaller opening, but that way it's always there, and we don't have to think about, oh, do we have an opening for this particular trap? We know it's gonna fit, and there isn't gonna be a gap. Nighttime drop trapping is absolutely something you can do. And what we've learned through experience is that the cats are really not bothered. Every once in a while, one might be, but for the most part, they're really not concerned about light being shown on the drop trap. So there's a couple of ways you can go with that. You can get one of these hanging flashlights, and just, you don't need to use duct tape unless you don't want it flying all over the place when you drop the trap. But basically attach the hanging flashlight and shine it towards the dish to illuminate the entire area under the drop trap. Or on the right there, you can see we have our car headlamps turned on and pointing at the trap some distance away, and you can see the cats are really not bothered by it. Okay, so at this point, let me see, Stacy, are there any questions at this point about anything we've gone over?
Just scanning through, folks. If you have any questions, put them in. One person was asking a question about that powder coating that sometimes is on traps. Do you recommend getting traps with that coating on it? I think it's that rubberized coating they're talking about.
Yeah, well, it will definitely, I think if you're out in rough conditions a lot, like you're often trapping in poor weather, or you're in a colder climate and you're trapping in the winter, then that kind of coating is going to definitely make the trap last longer. But the Tomahawk equipment is usually quite well made, and we haven't found a real need for that. but it's not that expensive. It costs like an extra 15%. So if you're buying a drop trap, you might be spending another $15 on it, and it will buy you years more of service. So it's not a bad investment at all, but not a necessary one if your budget is tight.
Great. And Melissa shared she loves the hanging light idea. She thinks that's fantastic. But it sounds like the questions, oh, here we go, another question. Any recommendations on getting the cat from the drop trap to the transport trap? So I'm sure you're going to cover that as we go along.
Yeah, we're gonna show you in detail how to do that, and that's a good segue to the next to this video that we're about to watch. It's about a 5-minute video, and it just shows you. Before I thought it would be much better for you to see the drop trap in action and the transfer, and then we'll break it down and talk about each step. But this will give you an overall look at how to drop trap and then how to get the cat out of the trap and into the box trap. Okay, there we go. So yeah, and that was an example of selective trapping where there was one new cat in the colony that we wanted to get. So now that you've seen the process, let's break it down. And the first thing is going to be assembling the trap. And there's a great video. We're not going to go into a lot of detail on this because it's easy. You know, once you've done it once or twice, it takes maybe 2 minutes. And there's a great video on Tomahawk that you see here called Drop Trap Setup and Tear Down. It's a 6-minute video, and definitely recommend that you watch that. Go to livetrap.com, click on instructions in the top menu on the home page. And then when you're on the instructions page, you'll see two things. You'll see written, a whole list of written instructions, and you can download the drop trap instructions. Although we have that now as a handout for those of you watching live. And again, go ahead and download that. But if you want to watch the video, keep scrolling down the page until you get to drop trap setup and tear down. But basically there's two pieces. There's the main frame that you see on the right there and the top, and you unfold the main frame and then you attach the top to it, and boom, you're up and running. So let's talk about using the trap. So baiting the trap, when you're doing selective trapping like we did with Wonka, you may have noticed, like you may have been wondering, why did Susie put such a huge plate of food under the drop trap? And that's because there are about 20 cats in that colony and 19 of them are fixed. And when we've trapped there before, sometimes we've had to wait you know, over an hour while multiple cats came and ate out of the bait. So you know, we got lucky and Wonka was the first one under. But it could be that you have to wait quite a while, and you need everybody to go in and be able to have a bite, and there's still enough bait left for your target cat. What you don't want to do is be you know, going in and disturbing the scene and refilling the bait bowl if you don't have to. So if you're doing selective trapping, put a large bowl and fill it generously. If you're brand new in a colony and they're all not fixed, you don't need a huge amount of food, because any cat that goes under, you're going to try to trap. So you don't need a large amount. But use enticing bait, like, you know, the usual tuna, sardines, roasted chicken. Now, I do note that some trappers find that just using the cat's regular food works best for them. Again, you often use this really enticing bait with box traps because you're trying to overcome the cat's fear and get them to go for it. And with drop traps, some trappers' philosophy is keep things as normal as possible since they don't have as much fear. And something familiar is going to be make them less wary. So you could try both, either way. Place it along the back of the trap and in the center. So notice where that bowl is positioned. It's right in the center of and all the way to the back. And lightly sprinkle a bait trail. Not too much bait. You don't want them to, you don't want it to give them just a little bit of a taste, so they'll keep going in. Not enough that they are satisfied before they get to the bowl. We mentioned before location. You need good visibility. So you're going to get, you know, as far away as you can, or if you're in a car and hidden, you don't need to be as far, but if you're outside, you want to be a good at least 25 to 50 feet away. You need the surface to be flat. And this is a mistake that is often made, which is, especially at night, people put the drop trap out on a patch of grass or something, and they don't notice a huge divot. And then the cat finds the divot after you've dropped the trap and squeezes out from under. So make sure the surface is flat, and that you can still do this on grass and other surfaces, but drop the trap, lay it flat on the ground, and inspect the perimeter to make sure there's no way cats can go under. So we had a cat once, we had the trap drop, and the ground was covered with thick leaves. And unknown to us, that the leaves were much thicker than we realized, and the cat was able to dig out the leaves and squeeze out from under the drop trap. So you want to be really careful about that. Now, unless you use a drop trap pad, which is a homemade item that we will tell you about, in which case you can trap on any surface, doesn't matter how uneven it is. Keep the drop trap near or at the usual feeding site. And again, you're transferring out into a box trap, so make sure there's enough room to the side to do the transfer. Now, if you can't leave enough room to the side, that's okay. You can always rotate the trap after the cat is caught. If you're on a flat surface and you do it very slowly and carefully. But ideally, you don't have to deal with that, and you just have enough room. So tip, use a familiar dish or bowl. This is you can see these cats eat out of a very distinct bowl. And with these guys, we did find actually in this colony that once we put this bowl under the drop trap, they were much more comfortable going under. Again, you're trying to keep things as familiar as possible, and cats are, take visual cues, and they see their familiar dish, and it just gives them more of a level of comfort. So whenever we can, we ask the caretaker to provide us with the usual bowl, or as long as it's not breakable, and then we'll use that instead of ours. Okay, so ready, but before you're ready to go, check these things. So especially if you're trapping alone, or definitely if you're trapping alone, you want to make sure that the box trap or the transfer cage, what you're going to put the cat in after the drop is, and the sheet to cover it, is within arm's reach of the drop trap, because you're going to run over there and cover up the drop trap, because same thing as with the regular box trap, covering the trap calms the cat down, but you're not going to want to have to run around, and then you might want to keep your, probably if the cat's freaking out and bouncing up and down, you're going to want to keep your foot on top of the drop trap for a moment. So you want what you need within arm's reach. Unwind your cord, make sure you're far enough away that it puts the cats at ease. Maintain, while you're waiting for the cat to go under, maintain a taut line on the cord. Don't have it real loose, because it may, if you're hesitating, when you pull the string, if you have to hesitate because you had too much slack on the cord, that's enough time for a cat to escape. If that does happen, just be patient and wait for the cat to go back under. Don't pull anyway if it's too late. But you can avoid that as long as it's taut, and it's really literally just a jerk of your wrist is enough to get the trap to drop. And that large sheet or blanket you're going to use to cover the drop trap, make sure that's by your side, so when you go running over, again, you've got it right there, and you're using as little time as possible to get the cat calmed. So again, selective trapping. In this scenario, the cat on the left is the one that we're after, and the cat that's now under the drop trap is already fixed. So obviously we don't want him. You can see here how the cat we're after is keeping an eye on the cat in the drop trap. And that's something we often find, is that one cat eating will attract other cats into going, the braver ones, the bolder ones go under first. The other ones see that cat eating, see that nothing bad happened, and then they're less hesitant themselves to go under. So you just be patient, let this guy have his bite and leave. Now our kitty is taking advantage, but here's another really important point. And this is probably the number one place where people go wrong, is they get too anxious. So on the left there, you can see the cat is not all the way in, not all the way covered, is just sticking her nose into the bait bowl, but still has, like, you can see her back legs are still poised to move. So believe it or not, these guys are fast enough that if they're not relaxed and they hear that, they hear the string being pulled, they hear the metal scraping, in a split second they can get out. Um, so the way you overcome that is you wait until the cat is relaxed. You wait till you see what's on the right there, where Kitty's in a much more relaxed posture. Her face is all the way in, her tail is in, and that will not give her enough time. Every once in a while, I'd say out of 1,000 cats, I've seen 1 or 2 that even in this position got out, but it's extremely rare. And 99.9% of the time, you're going to catch the cat if this is the position they're in. They just don't have enough time to react. So if you're not sure, if the cat is again, you're going to want to pull it the moment you think you have daylight, but it's better to wait too long and the cat goes it back out before you pulled the string, and wait, because if you pull it too soon and the cat escapes, it may be a very long time before you get another chance. But if the cat, if you're not quite sure and the cat doesn't go all the way in and goes back out, there's a very good chance that the cat will return within minutes. And sometimes they kind of test the water, they go under and then they come right back out and then they go back under again. And when they're more relaxed, you can catch them. So here's the drop. And one thing to notice real quick, so it's a subtle thing in these photos, but if you look at the photo on the left, you can see that the drop trap is not quite hit the ground yet. So it was just pulled, but look at the position of the cat. The cat is already heading out. And a half a second, if the cat had had a half a second more, she would have gotten out. That's how fast everything happens. But we're there on the right, we waited patiently, and now Kitty didn't have that split second and is trapped. So you're going to cover the trap quickly. This is our New Jersey TNR coordinator, Jade Vasquez, in action. She is a master drop trapper. And the transfer, so you line up the rear door of the box trap with the side door of the drop trap. And here's another, if you do drop trapping enough, you'll make every mistake in the book. And this is one that I made where I thought, well, why have a box trap just sitting there? Might as well set it, right, while I have the drop trap up, just in case they go in that instead, which is a great idea, except that in the excitement of drop trapping this kitty, I forgot that the front door was open, and I did the transfer and watched the cat go running out the front. So as you can imagine, that was a real moment of disbelief. So I just avoid that. I don't set the box trap that I'm going to transfer the cat into, so that can never possibly happen. But if you are more thoughtful than I was at that time, just then make sure you double check that the front door of the box trap is closed before you do the transfer. Now, the Tomahawk traps come with these extra, what are called spring clips. So you can see that spring clips attach the main frame to the top of the drop trap, but there's also 2 extra ones on each side of the door opening. And the purpose for those is to attach to the trap that you're transferring into. And this eliminates the possibility of a shift, like the cat just all of a sudden moves very quickly and hard, and there's a slight shift of the box trap and the drop trap, and it creates just enough of an opening for them to, like I say, all they have to do is get their head through or their paw through, and they can push through the rest in a heartbeat. So if you use these extra spring clips, just don't pull them too tight. You don't want to jam the drop trap, the box trap, right up against the door to the point where you can't open the doors, but just enough so that they can't shift, and then you eliminate that danger. That's probably where transfers go wrong is when people don't use these clips, and the cat makes a sudden jarring movement, creates an opening, and is gone. So use the clips and you will never have that problem. Okay, you're going to open the doors. Now, let me go back one slide. Let's see, 2 slides. Oh, nope. Okay, so what you see here is the box trap is covered with a sheet, the trap you're transferring into, except for the back door. And the psychology here is you want to leave that uncovered so it looks like daylight. It looks like a way out. The cat is desperate to get out of the drop trap, sees some daylight towards the end of the box trap, and will go running in. You know, if you need to further steady the drop trap, just put your foot on it or straddle it, and then lift both sliding doors, the rear door of the box trap and the transfer door of the drop trap at the same time. Once the kitty's in, if you only have one cat in the drop trap, we'll talk about multiple cats, but if you only have one, slide the rear door of the box trap shut. Don't worry about the drop trap side door, just the box trap rear door. Make sure that's shut and lock it before you do anything, before you detach the spring clips. Lock the rear door, fully cover the box trap like you would in a normal trapping, and you're done. Now, what if the cat won't go into the box trap? Like you've done everything. Now, let me say that 3 out of 5 times, maybe 4 out of 5 times, the cat's just going to go in as soon as you open the doors. Like I say, they're looking for a way out, and they'll take their chances on the box trap. But 1 out of 5, 1 out of 4 won't. And what do you do in that case? So one thing you can do if you're alone is slowly. Now we know that feral cats, when they're in captivity, they prefer to be covered. They feel exposed when they're out in the open. So they like something over them. So what you can do is you can pull the blanket slowly towards you. You're standing by the box trap, and you can pull the blanket slowly towards you so that away from you, the cat is uncovered. And if he wants to stay covered, he has to move towards the box trap. And that being exposed is enough often to get the cat to run into the box trap. Now, if you have somebody with you, then it's even easier because you can just have them go to the opposite side of the drop trap, bend down, stay a safe distance away. But you know, one look at you and at your helper, and the cat's probably going to go fleeing in the other direction. You can gently poke a stick towards the cat without touching the cat. You can spritz a little water, so maybe bring a spray bottle with you. One thing we like to use is a trap divider from above, and we kind of gently direct the cat towards the box trap entrance. If none of these tricks work, then you just have to wait and trust that the cat will go in eventually. They always do. And sometimes, every once in a while, you really have to sit there and wait 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but sooner or later, they decide it's time to get out of there. I see a question. See, Luna is asking to see how the string is tied to the drop trap. Yeah, I don't know if we have a close-up of that, but it's just a simple knot on the drop trap prop that kind of what substitutes for a stick. When you lift the drop trap up and prop it on the ground, you'll see there's a couple of bars there, and we just tie 2 knots, you know, one basic knot and then another one on top of that to make sure that first one can't get loose. So there's no special knot or anything like that. Okay, so what if you catch more than one cat in the drop trap? Now you may want to do this. You know, if we can get more than one, then that's great. We'll always go for it. So what you're going to do is you transfer one at a time into separate box traps, and but this time, when you once the cat goes in, you want to shut the box door, the box trap rear door, and the drop trap side door at the same time. Don't forget about the drop trap side door. And you transfer one and the other one goes running out because you forgot to close the door. So if they move faster than you do and more than one cat gets into the box trap at once, that's why it's super important to have a trap divider with you. because you can just separate them in the box trap with the trap divider. And when you're in a safe enclosed space, you can transfer out the rear door into another box trap rear door. As I say, best to do it in an enclosed space just in case something goes wrong. But that does happen once in a while. So make sure you have a trap divider with you, and you can just, they'll be fine, you know, 2 of them in a box trap as long as they're separated. Okay, so just a quick run through. We have Farley the Feral here to do a little more demonstration, drive home some of the basic stuff. So you're about to pull the string. You've set everything up. So what's wrong with this picture? And we have a poll for that, Stacy.
What is wrong with this picture? The pull string is too taut. The bowl is made of glass. The cat is not in the right position to pull. The bowl's in the wrong position and the prop stick is raised too high. So 6% say the pull string is too taut. 57% say the bowl is made of glass. 97% say the cat's not in the right position. 69% the bowl is in the wrong position. And 6% the prop stick is raised too high.
Oh, you guys are good. Yeah, there are 3 things wrong here. Let's look at the bowl first off. So the bowl is made of glass. So that's not good. We don't want that. And also the bowl's too far forward. It needs to be at the back of in the center. The center part is right, but it needs to be all the way in the back, or else Kitty's going to be able to escape when you pull. You won't have gotten yourself enough time. And then lastly, what almost 97% of you got right is Kitty's in the exact wrong position. Kitty's heading out. So you pull that string and it won't even get halfway to the ground before the cat is gone. Okay, so we have one more like that. It's not a poll, so we'll leave this up. And what's wrong with this picture as we try to catch Farley? Okay, the most obvious one is that huge pothole. So when when you've dropped the trap, Farley is going to be able to squeeze out from under pretty easily. The other thing that's wrong with this picture is there's no weight on the anchor. So if Farley was strong enough, let's say you had put the drop trap over so that it didn't drop on top of that pothole, Farley could have dragged the trap over to the pothole and then squeezed out from under. And we've seen that happen actually. So you don't want to, you want to make sure the ground is completely flat once the trap is down, and you want weight on that anchor flap in the back so that the trap can't move. So there's the right way to do it, okay? We've got weight on our anchors. We've got a plastic bowl that's in the back in the center. We've waited till Farley is all the way in and has his head in the bowl. And at that point, you can safely pull the string. Okay, any questions at this point, Stacy?
We have a couple of questions. There was one from Donna that was surprised that you're recommending feeding on a plate because she's had experience with cats dragging the plate out, even a heavy one. And so she recommends putting the food right onto the ground. So she's wondering, why do you recommend using a plate?
Well, that's a great question. You know, I hadn't really had that experience of a cat dragging the plate out, so that would be one reason. The other is that, as I mentioned before, we like to use a bowl that the cats are familiar with, so that that just seems to make them more comfortable about going under. I'd also just feel a little hesitant to put a huge amount on the ground because, like, sometimes we'll set the drop trap up in one spot, and then after observing the cats, we'll realize, like, if it was 10 feet over more towards the back, they might be a little more likely to come over, and we'll make adjustments and we'll move it. But I suppose if you put a small amount on the ground and you were fairly confident that the drop trap's not going anywhere, then that would be fine. That would be fine to put the food on the ground. And thank you for the warning. Like I say, if you do this long enough, everything will go wrong. So we'll watch out for that and try to avoid having a kitty drag the food out from under.
And then we have another, just a recommendation that it's definitely not wise to use a, put a can in there, just with like a pop-up can, and just put the can in there, because the cats are going to cut their tongues and stuff. So
we're against. We don't think you should use cans for anything. Don't use them for water dishes. Don't use them for bait bowls. Don't use them for food dishes, because they sometimes they can have very, very sharp edges. So we don't want to risk cutting the cat's tongue.
And I think you've addressed this in the past, but I just want to bring this to your attention because we had quite a few comments, especially early on in the presentation. A lot of concerns about the trap coming down on cats' tails and that kind of stuff. And I know you really at length talked about how important it is to be patient, wait for the cat to come in, so that doesn't happen. But have you ever had experiences with cats' tails getting injured?
I have not had experience with injury. I have seen, again, you do this enough. I have seen traps come down on cats, and it could be usually it's a mistake on the trapper's part. They got impatient, and if the cats move so quickly, and this is probably it's a great question, and this is the big reason why we favor the smaller drop trap, the 3-foot square one, because that weighs, I think, 14 pounds altogether. The 4-foot square one is more in the 20 to 25 pound range, and that scares us. If we feel like it's falling at such a speed that if 25 pounds hits a cat's tail or hits a cat's back, you could cause serious injury. We haven't seen that happen with the 14. Every once in a while, yeah, a cat gets a glancing blow, but we've never seen a cat actually have an injury. Now, let me say and a lot of that is, as you said, Stacy, it's about being patient. And if the cat's tail is not under, or or one cat's under and another cat's sitting by the side, you have to be patient, and we will not pull if we think there's any danger. So, but it is nice to know that if you miscalculate, it's very unlikely that the weight of this trap is going to cause injury, with one huge exception, which is, like, look at these little kittens here. So if that trap in the front falls down on a little 6-week-old, 8-week-old kitten, yeah, you could cause some serious harm. So with kittens in the picture, you have to be extra, extra careful, and keep in mind that it's better that they walk away and you kick yourself for not having pulled sooner, because they will come back. So yeah, patience is everything. But we are a little afraid of the big trap because we think that probably could cause injury.
And then just to follow up on that, the bouncing around after the trap is down. Some people are suggesting putting some sort of a crib pad or some sort of a padding underneath. So is there, I know you want to get the covering over as fast as possible, but what sort of injuries have you seen with regards to the aftermath?
With any kind of trapping, especially when you're using the normal box traps, like, once in a while you'll get what we call a case of trap burn, where the kitty rubs their forehead so hard against the trap it actually scrapes the skin away, and it looks really bad. Or they may hurt put their paw in and squeeze it too hard against the metal and cause a bloody paw. I will say that with the drop trap, we see that much, much less frequently. In fact, I can only remember a couple of times where I saw cats in a drop trap because even though they're moving around really quickly, they know not to run into things. And so they have enough space, as opposed to in a box trap where they're really tight in and they're freaking out, and it's much more likely they're going to bang against the metal. So the trick is to cover it as quickly as possible and calm them down. So there's always a risk of injury in that, of superficial wounds when you're using traps, but we've actually seen that happen less with drop traps, not more. And covering them up quickly is the best thing you can do to avoid that. But
Yep.
none of this is risk-free. So
Yeah, and several people have reported that they haven't had problems using the drop trap. Those that have experience, but it does sound like patients. And the last question I just want to ask you a question about: is there like a chance, or trying to understand why Tomahawk didn't make the opening smaller? So are there a way that they would make the opening smaller instead of having to use the adjuster?
no, because that would be an extremely expensive proposition. They'd have to make a whole new mold.
Okay.
That would cost many, many thousands of dollars, and then they would have to market 2 of them, and it's for a $10 insert you can solve that problem. So yeah, I don't think they're gonna do that, because it's a pretty good solution. The insert, you just zip tie it on, and boom, you're done.
And I know I said that was the last question. One more question. When using the box trap, is it best to have it covered like halfway over before they go in? If you've got maybe multiple traps like set, and might not be able to get right there right away, is there a way to like partially cover the drop trap, or is the drop trap when it's set always wide open the way it is right now?
Yeah, you can definitely cover the top of it. So sometimes we do that because we're in a spot where the sun is hitting the bait, and we don't want it to dry it up. So we'll take a sheet and we'll clothespin it onto the top, covering the top of the drop trap. So if you want to do that to get the cats calmer faster, you can. The big trick is just make sure it's not flapping around in the wind. That's the hard part, because you're covering a fairly large surface. So you need to make sure it's quite secure and not creating a movement that's going to scare the cats. But there's nothing wrong with pre-covering the top of the drop trap.
Excellent. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, great questions, everybody. Learned a couple of things myself so far. So we talked about picking one out from the crowd, selective trapping. That's a really common use, probably the most common use of the drop trap. And there's a number of reasons. We mentioned you might want to do this. You might be trying to get the last cats that you haven't fixed yet. You may have a newcomer, kittens that just appeared. Maybe a cat is injured or ill, so you want to get them to the vet. And of course, if you're starting in on a colony and you can't get everybody fixed at once, you probably want to prioritize the pregnant cats. So you want to select them out. So we have another video here that shows a selective trapping in action. And I'll forewarn you that the cat we're after, the pregnant cat, is the black cat that you see up there. So that's who we're waiting for. And a couple of things to keep an eye on are notice how other cats are in the trap eating, and and the black cat is waiting for them. So you need to be patient and wait too. And then also observe how the timing of the pull, that even though we're really anxious to catch this kitty, we wait until she's all the way in and her head's in the bowl before we do the drop. So you're going to pull the string.
What's it?
You're going to pull the string. Okay, and there's our intrepid drop trapper, Susie Richmond, at work again. And you can see in the slow motion how, in that case, Kitty didn't start to move until the trap had hit the ground. And that's the advantage of having the cat really engrossed in eating, having the head all the way. You don't have to wait a long time, but you have to wait a few seconds until they're really absorbed in eating. So let's talk about the drop trap pad. So this is a homemade thing. We're trying to get it mass manufactured. We were making good progress on that before a lot of things got slowed down by the pandemic. So we're still hopeful this will come out in the future. But in the meantime, you can make your own. And basically, it's a flat piece of wood that you can create a level surface for the trap to fall down on. And you can see in the photo there on the right how the ground is really uneven. And the only way, and this was the only place that kitties came out from under a house to eat. So unless we put a drop trap there, we were not going to catch them. So we created our own level surface, attached the drop trap to it, and boom, we're in business. And also, if the ground's too soft and they could dig out from under, you can put this on the ground and prevent that from happening. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the details of building this because you can download the slides and have these basic plans. Not a difficult thing to make. You know, you got a couple of pieces of plywood, a 1/2 inch that are 2 feet by 4 feet, a couple of door hinges. You're going to need cable ties, which is also known as zip ties, and then paint to cover the wood. So that's all you need, those materials. You're going to put the hinges on about 6 inches down from the edge. And the reason for this is because you want to be able to fold it in half in order to be able to transport it. Otherwise, you won't be able to fit it into your car. You're going to paint the wooden hinges, and then you're going to drill a couple of holes towards the back of the pad, and so that you can create loops that you're going to attach cable ties in. And there's the exact dimensions there about where to put the holes and where to attach that loop that you created with the cable ties. And that's going to be how you attach the drop trap onto the pad. Remember, we're not going to be able to use an anchor weight, so we need to make sure the drop trap can't move off the pad once the trap is dropped. So when you're out in the field, you're going to see that you can put the drop trap on the pad, fold the anchor flap up and attach it to the side of the drop trap with a clip or another zip tie. And then you're going to take another zip tie, loop it through the bottom of the drop trap frame and through that cable tie loop that you've created in the pad. The big trick here is that orange zip tie, don't pull it too tight, because remember, the trap has to be able to lift up, and then it needs to be able to fall down. So if you pull it as tight as you can, it's not going to be able to move, and it'll slow down its ability to drop. Now, if you're on uneven ground, which is why you're using this, then use rocks and things like that to make sure that the drop trap's not able to bend, and stays straight. And the 1/2 inch plywood is enough weight that you can get a flat surface, even though you've cut it in half and have hinges on it. Again, as long as you're leveling it off with rocks underneath and things like that. As I say, we hope to come out with a commercial version of this, and as soon as we can get some space in the manufacturing process, we hope to do that. So there you are. This is a drop trap on a pad on a very uneven ground, and this was the only place the cats ate, so we had to trap there. And so you can see the ground's very uneven, but the pad is leveling it off. So when we drop the trap on this kitty, he's not able to get out from under. Okay, now here's a very esoteric use of the drop trap. We're getting into the more advanced stuff now, obviously. And we always hesitate to show this, but we figure, especially for those of you who are experienced, you've all had this situation, and this is a good solution to what can be a really difficult problem, and that's what we call the stubborn caretaker. And that's the caretaker who insists on picking up the cats because she can, or he can, and they try to shove them into your box traps. That almost always ends quite badly with fleeing cats and or bloody arms. But we found that just no matter what we say, um, people are going to do this sometime. If that's their mindset, there's nothing we're going to say. So we want to really emphasize that it's not a good idea for anybody to be handling cats while you're trapping. But if they do, the drop trap can really save you. So there you go. It's much easier to have them toss the kitty gently under a drop trap than it is to have them try to shove the cat into a box trap, because that actually will work. And you'll notice there we had the drop trap on a pad because the ground was uneven. So mom and kittens, as I mentioned before, you can catch entire families using the drop trap. So this is a situation that Jade was in Jersey City, and she caught a mom and 5 kittens. And what she did was she caught the mom first, and with the drop trap, and then she transferred mom into a transfer cage. It had to be a transfer cage because, as you can see, she then put the transfer cage under the drop trap. But look what she also did. She covered the transfer cage so that mom is only visible from the side. And now kittens, if they're going to get to mom, so you can see the transfer cage is also off center. It's to the right, but it leaves enough room for when the kittens come to mom, they're going to be right in the back center of the trap. So the only way to approach is through the drop trap and from the side there. So that's what she did. She left mom there, and the kittens did all come out, and she was able to catch the whole family at one time. So you can also catch kittens first, put them in a transfer cage like this, and use it to attract the mother. You can use kittens to attract other kittens. When you're putting kittens in there, you got to be very careful about you're not directly in the sun, that you're not keeping them for too long. So that they're not going to, be physically harmed in any way. But you've depending on the kitten's age, you should have enough time to be able to lure the mother out. Also, think about another thing we've done with drop traps is we dial up a YouTube video. If we're trying to catch kittens, we'll go onto YouTube and find a video of mom calling for kittens. If we're trying to get the mom, we'll put kittens crying. We did this once where we had the kitten, but the kitten was too weak to put under a drop trap. We had to immediately take care of her. So what we did was we sacrificed our cell phone and put that under the drop trap. Played a YouTube video of a kitten calling for mom, and she came dashing over, went right under, and we caught her too. Remote controls, that's always a question that comes up with drop traps. So there are 2 ways that you can use a remote control instead of a string, basically. One is on the left there. You can replace the string with a remote control that will drop the trap the normal way from the front. So what that remote control does is it sticks out a little, I don't know what you would call it. It's a little round piece of metal, and goes under the prop stick on the top there, and when you pull the remote trigger, that metal cylinder pulls backwards and causes the trap to fall. Or you can also use something that's kind of been happening in the last year or two. People have figured out they can use a remote control on the side door and not drop the trap at all. Just invite kitties to come in through the side and then use a remote to drop the side door and just have the drop trap already on the ground. So here's the equipment that you would need that you can get from Tomahawk. You've got at the top there is all the equipment you would need for the replacing the string and raising the drop trap and dropping it from the front. Or you can also get a side door bracket, just a special bracket that would then adapt that whole setup to the side door. And there's instructional videos about how to put all this together. It's really not that complicated. Now we personally prefer we prefer using a string. So you'll see on the left there the situation that we were trying to trap this particular cat, and what we discovered was this was one of these super alert cats, and when we pulled the trigger for the remote, the sound of the engine, the little motor in the remote, alerted the cat that something was happening, and he was out before it could hit the ground. So that's pretty unusual, but you know, we're not that, you know, Susie and I are not that technologically minded, and so, you know, if there's something that you can do wrong with equipment like this, then we seem to always find it, and we're just more comfortable with the string and knowing we can do that. That said, there are situations where you really need a remote because you can't get a clear line of vision, or whatever it might be. You can see the trap, but not in a way where the string will work. So what we prefer if we're using a remote is this side door technique, because it eliminates a lot of the possibility of things going wrong. And it seems like cats are pretty comfortable going in, and they don't seem to be as wary as with a normal box trap. Not sure why. I think maybe because there's a lot of interior space. It seems kind of big. It's not a narrow thing like a box trap, so maybe they're just not as wary. So if we're going remote, we're going with the side door. But that said, there's a lot of people who swear by the remote control on the front, and it's really a matter of figuring out what you're most comfortable with. So let's show you the side door. It's a fun little video. It starts, you'll see that the trapper, these are folks from TNR Utopia, which is a TNR group in Queens, New York. They started off using box traps on the first day, had no luck. So they came back the second day with using a side door remote on a drop trap. Okay, so yeah, these folks are really creative with their videos. If you go to their website, tnrutopia.org, they've got a ton of stuff like this. But you can see how effective that side door can be. One of the things that's interesting is we tend to raise the side door a little bit higher, but they keep it pretty low, about halfway down, and that still worked quite well for them. The lower it is, the less chance of it getting jammed or anything like that on the way down. It is important when you're doing this kind of technique that you have a good clean side door that's not all, you know, bent and causes the side door to catch. It needs to drop really smoothly. Okay, so let's talk about mass drop trapping at the beginning of the trapping experience. And so that's the idea. This is particularly effective when you have cats that we call when they clump together. So when like a lot of colonies, you know, you'll see the caretakers, if there's 12 cats, they'll put out 12 separate little bowls, and each cat has their own space, and they don't like to be right next to each other. But other colonies, you'll see the caretaker puts out like a big bowl of food, and they all gather around in a circle and start eating from it together. So what we see as trappers, when we see cats clumping like that, it's always a good idea to go scout your colony before you trap if you have the opportunity. We'll try to take advantage of that, because if they'll clump around their normal food bowl, they'll clump under a drop trap as well, and you can catch a whole lot of them at once. Like you can see here, if we had dropped this trap, we would have caught like I think seven cats at the same time. Now it's especially, like I say, it's especially effective, and you do this at the outset of your trapping. So you're trying to get like half the colony at once, and eliminate the amount of regular box traps you have to put out, or the amount of time. So it's effective when it's a large colony, they're on a feeding pattern, and they cluster together when they eat. So I want to talk about this scenario in depth, because this is real advanced stuff, and it combines a lot of what we've been talking about, the different techniques, plus some more innovations, just to show you how creative you can get with this stuff in this one particular trapping that we did. So this is the trapping site. You can see it's a beach park. That's the ocean over on the left, and this is an aerial view. So you're looking down from above. And just to point out the major landmarks is the fence. You can see there's a fence that runs along where the dotted lines are. That pile of concrete and rocks is where the colony of cats lived. They actually lived inside of that. And this was a really tricky situation because, and then there's a little hill there on the side. But what was tricky about this was that, I'll turn this into a schematic to explain. So the cats were very feral, very wary of people. And what they would be fed along the fence, and then they would come out from that pile of concrete and rocks, cross the pathway, and eat at that spot. But that's all they would do. They would not, you could not get any, they would not, if you put the food somewhere else, they would not come. They always ate right by that fence, and it was a narrow path. So it made it a difficult situation to try to drop trap them. We couldn't get on top of the pile of rocks, and look, we couldn't trap from the other side of the fence. So we had to trap from the side. So how do we approach this this particular situation? So here's what the setup was. We put 2 drop trap pads. Oh, also the ground was uneven, to add one more complication to this. So we put 2 drop traps on pads directly across from the pile of rocks and right where they're used to eating. Then we had 2 trappers who were going to pull the strings off well into the distance, like 50 feet away down the path. And we had one person up on the hill with binoculars who had a good view the drop traps and could shout out when to pull the string and when there were enough cats under the two of them to go with that. So one of the problems you can see is, how do we get those two trappers to pull the string when they're way off at a right angle and not head on? So we had to invent something which we call the drop trap 360, which is basically we took a 10-pound barbell weight and a dowel that was thick enough to jam tightly into the center of it. And we made two of those. And then we were able to wrap the string around it so that the pull could be done at a right angle. And what we realized after this is that, gee, with this, you could even stand almost directly behind the trap and pull it. It really eliminated any need to be directly in front of the drop trap. You could pull from any angle that you wanted. So that's what we did. We now had, in addition to the drop traps and the pads, we had these drop trap 360s, and you could see how the blue line, the string wound around the 360s and went to the two trappers who could now pull. And we will show you how this went.
Grab a blanket.
Okay, so there you see we caught 8 cats at once. And one thing to notice about in that video was how patient the spotter was. Like, because these cats were really spooky. You saw how there must have been some slight sound, and they all ran away, but nobody panicked, and we just waited until they came back. And the spotter waited until as many were under, and it looked like that was it. Probably no more were going to go, and then she called out to do the pull. So you can see, you can get quite creative with the drop traps. So that's pretty much it for our drop trap presentation. I do want to let you know that next up in our ongoing series with the Community Cats podcast, and we thank them so much, and Stacy and Kristen for hosting these, and it's really been a wonderful forum. Next one will be September 12th, and we'll be going over colony caretaking tips and tricks. So all things shelter and food and everything else we can think of. about how to take care of the cats. So you can sign up for that now. tinyurl.com/colony-caretaking, or go to, yeah, actually, I think that's the place to go to register. And at this point, we'll take any questions.
One person is asking, they have an injured cat, and any suggestions on how to trap injured cats? And I know that your team's been doing that quite a bit in New York, and so looking for sort of tips and tricks on how to get an injured cat.
Well, as long as the injured cat is eating, you can use the drop trap like you would with any cat. You know, put a big bowl of food underneath, and just wait until that cat is under. And if there are other cats that are under at the same time, still pull the trap and just transfer out the ones that you don't want. But if they're not hungry, if they're not eating, then it becomes a lot trickier. And you have to basically, if they're not eating because they can't smell, then you need to use really pungent, try to break through that and use really pungent bait like sardines or roasted chicken or something. But the basic idea is to lure that cat under the drop trap and catch them that way.
Question on the drop pad. Is it critical that the wood gets painted?
No, it'll just last a lot longer, you know, because it'll be protected from the elements. And also, you can paint it to just sort of blend in more depending on where you're trapping. But it's not critical that it be painted, no.
All right. So I'm gonna, while folks are still putting in a few more questions, I have a couple of polls, and then I'm gonna go in and do a little bit of cat trivia.
Great.
Whoop, one more question here. Is it good to set up and feed them several days before trapping day?
Yes, the more that you have them on a pattern, the more predictable where and when they eat, it's going to make trapping much easier for you. So if you get them used to eating at the spot where you can use a drop trap at 5 p.m. every day, then you're going to come at 4 and set everything up and be waiting so that when they arrive at 5, you're all set to go.
All right, excellent. I'm going to do a couple polls. They're sort of coronavirus, COVID related polls. And for many of you, you may have tuned into the pop-up panels that I did. And so a couple of these are repeat questions just because Kristen and I are fascinated to see how the statistics are changing. How long do you think we'll be hindered by COVID issues with regards to the work that we're doing with community cats? So 1 to 2 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, or just too long to even estimate. So 13% say 1 to 2 months, 24% say 3 to 6 months, 30% say 6 to 12 months, and 34% say too long to even estimate. Great. That's interesting. It's sort of pulling back a little bit. I think the last time we did this poll, it was really heavily in the too long, we can't even estimate. So people are coming back a little bit on that. If you manage calls for assistance for cats and you have a wait list, how many cats are on that list? The same amount as last year at this time, more than last year, less than last year, or we just don't even have a wait list? So where 7% are at same as last year, 52% say more than last year, 9% are saying less than last year, and 33% aren't managing a wait list. Do you find those interesting results, Brian?
Yeah, what it says to me is that there's a lot of cats out there that are waiting to get fixed. I mean, you've got, I assume the people who don't have a wait list still have, you know, because they just are not tracking that, probably have more. So you got like 85% who have a delay in cats that they need fixed. And of course, that's not surprising given that everything's shut down for a couple of months. But hopefully, you know, we're starting to catch up.
Just a reminder to folks that the handouts are there on your control panel. So there's a little tab at the bottom that says handouts, and that's where you should download your handouts before this webinar ends. We got several other questions that came during poll time, which is great. So
let me say though, stick around for the Stacy's cat trivia is amazing. So
actually I put a new one in there too that you and Susie don't even know. So I've got a surprise question in there too.
All right.
So if you have a colony that's 75% ear tipped and 25% not, and the 25% are also classified as hard to get, should you spend time on that colony?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the thing is, the closer you get to 100%, the more successful you're going to be in stabilizing and the population and making sure it goes down over time, so that as these kitties live out their lives, they're not being replaced. So we will, you know, a typical scenario for us is we'll go out on a 20 cat colony, and in the first day we'll get 15 or 16 of them. But then we'll come back 1 or 2 more days to get those last 3 or 4 cats. And you know, as opposed to just running around and getting always getting a whole bunch in the beginning and then trying to go for quantity. It's really, we want to leave a place completely under control when we walk away from it. And it can take just as long or longer to get those last 3 or 4 cats as the first 80% of them. But that's what's critical to success, where we see population reduction over time. So I'll give you an example. In Riverside Park in Manhattan, on the Upper West Side, there were 65 cats when we started, and we stuck with it until we caught and fixed every single one of them. And today, you know, close to 20 years later, there's 1 cat left in the entire park. So that's the kind of results you see when you stick with it, and it's all about getting as close to 100% as you can. Now, if you've got 1 cat and you know you've tried a couple of times, you just can't get them, then maybe you need to move on and come back and try again another time because they're too spooked. We do find that you can over trap, and it gets to a point where you're just not going to catch them, and then you have to wait and come back later. But we always want to get 100% whenever we can.
And Brian, do you have any last closing comments for everybody?
Yeah, just thanks for you know, taking time to watch, and you know, I hope this is useful. Keep in mind that you know, if you're still in a situation where you know, spay neuter is not as accessible as it was, but there's still a little bit of it, then drop traps can be really helpful. You know, if you want to be prioritizing pregnant cats this time of year, and female cats and things like that, and this allows you to really make the most efficient use out of what spay neuter is available. So, you know, go out there and try it. Like I say, practice once or twice on a kitty that's already fixed. But I think you'll find that it's a great addition to your toolkit. And thank you, Stacy, as always, and Kristen for hosting this. And thank you, Susie, my silent partner.
Yeah, she's been doing a great job with the questions today. It was thank you, Susie, so much for everything that you did with regards to that. Brian, one last question, just to share with everybody again, the website for the colony management software. Where do people go to find out about that?
It's catstats.org, which is cat, C-A-T, stats, S-T-A-T-S. .org, and just so people know, it's a program that's intended for TNR programs. It's not for individuals. Your program can start your own online database, and then your individual colony caretakers can sign up through your site. So this is for organizations more than it is for individual colony caretakers at the level of registering for a database.
Susie, did I miss anything out there in the question world? Anything that you saw that were interesting from the folks out there?
I think we covered most of it. There was one question that somebody had that I thought Brian might want to address. about what percentage of a colony do you need to trap in order to say, okay, now we can walk away? I mean, I know you want to get to as close as 100% as possible, of course, but do you want to elaborate on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of myths out there about what the magic level is. I mean, it tends to be somewhere people say 70%, 75%, 80%. So in order to get stability in the population, yeah, I would say you have to get at least to 75, 80%. But if you've got one female cat that you haven't fixed and they have a litter of 4 kittens, then all of a sudden, you're off to the races again. So there, I think the thing to keep in mind is there is no magic threshold for more than short-term stability. Short-term, you're probably looking at 70, 75%. But if you want long-term stability, you need to get as many of the cats fixed as you can.
Okay.
That's great. Excellent. One last final announcement. Just July 18th, the Community Cats Podcast is hosting Feline Leukemia Day. So if you're interested in finding out all things feline leukemia, either whether it's adoption, testing, different information there, July 18th, it's an all-day event. You can go to the communitycatspodcast.com. And we always have all of these events posted. And a last shout out for the Facebook group. You're welcome to join our online conference community, we're calling it. It's online cat conference. If you search that group in Facebook, you would just have to ask for approval to join us, but you're welcome to join us, and then you can ask questions there. And of course, obviously, we hope to see everybody at Colony Caretaking Tips and Tricks, and we'll see you in early September. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us, and tune in to the Community Cats Podcast and all the efforts of and work of Neighborhood Cats. Take care.
Okay, bye. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.